for yesterday's video, I posted this movie that I called A Short Story, and it was basically like text on screen that was sort of explaining a lot of things in a short amount of time. So it's like 2 minutes long if you haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I suggest that you do, just so you understand what I'm talking about. But in that short movie, I expressed a lot of ideas kind of related to my personal experiences. And so today I wanted to kind of contextualize that a little bit, because one of the biggest ideas that I presented in that little short story was the idea of belonging. So I thought today would be a good opportunity for me to share the story of the first time in my entire life that I ever felt like I actually belonged somewhere. I made sure that for this specifically, I was wearing a bright blue shirt, which matches this poster that's right kind of over my shoulder, because this specific shade of blue is kind of like close to cyan. I call it Aquabats blue. And that's what the whole story centers around for today, is this band right here, the Aquabats. Long story short, I'm 31 years old, so when I was in high school and middle school and before, there wasn't social media and there was the internet, barely, but it was, vague instant messengers and ASL and stuff like that. When I got to middle school and high school, it was all about music in the town that I grew up in, which was a town that I just didn't fit in with at all to begin with. But in middle school, it was all about music. That's what dictated who you hung out with, what kind of clothes you wore, what kind of person you were, what kind of attitude you had, and all that. And on top of that, I didn't know any better. I was like a kid. You're like 13 and you're just turning on MTV because that was a thing we did at the time. And you're watching like Total Request Live and you're like, these are the top 10 musics in the country. Like, they must be the best. Why would anyone listen to anything else? And then you don't know any better. A lot of the stuff you see are these bands where it was like, everyone's trying to be super tough and super scary and take themselves super seriously. And as a kid, you're just like, all right, that's my identity now too, I guess. It's really not fun at all to live that kind of a life. But even before that, like, I never, in my whole life, really fit in anywhere. And trust me, I have like 1,000 stories about not fitting in places. Like, I totally get it, and it's awful. But when I was in like my early teenage years, that's where I just kind of started thinking like, well, I guess this is just how it is, and this is how the world is. And that was until I stumbled across this band. And one of the first things that drew them to me was they had a song that came out in about the year 2000 called I Fell Asleep on My Arm, which basically just parodies the musical stylings of all of like the nu metal bands that were popular at the time. So stuff like Limp Bizkit and Korn and Kid Rock and all this stuff where it's like this showboating machoism, and they really just kind of lampoon it in a way that at 14 or 15 years old I was just kind of like, oh, that stuff is sort of ridiculous. And then I dove deeper into the Aquabats catalog of music at the time and was like, this stuff is super fun, it's entertaining, and like I actually enjoy it, and it's goofy, but nobody I was around at the time felt the same way. When I played the Aquabats for my best friend at the time, who ended up becoming a fan, he literally told me later that he had thought I went insane. And my goal isn't to like make this a mini Aquabats documentary, but I totally could talk about them for a really long time. My goal here is just to kind of explain the difference, the contrast between what they represent versus everything else that I was surrounded by at the time. And at those formative years when you're like 14, 15 years old and you're just searching for an identity and a place to belong in the world, this was the first time that I was like, oh, this is like, it's okay to be fun and silly and goofy. And so my whole point today is I want to tell you the story of the first time in my life I ever felt like I belonged anywhere. And usually big changes like that take place over time, but I have a specific date, which was October 25th, 2002, took place at the Key Club in Hollywood, California, which is not the most stereotypical place to have like a personal revelation. And so the Aquabats are playing a show that night at the Key Club. I got like my one friend at the time to go with me, the person who said I was insane and then eventually became a fan. And we got in the car, we took the day off school, and I mean, legitimately, like, excused absences. We didn't just ditch school or anything. But I'm so neurotic that, like, even though the show didn't start till 6 or 7 that night, I wanted to get there early. So we got there at, like, 11:30 in the morning, which is way too early. And we were kind of pulling up by where the Key Club is, and I was like, oh, maybe we're gonna see, like, the Aquabats or something setting up. And then I looked over, and on the street corner were like 3 members of the Aquabats, and I was just like, what? And so quickly went to park the car, got out, ran out to try to find them, and they were already gone. And so we just kind of stood on this street corner in Hollywood for like the next couple of hours. They came back from getting food or wherever they went, and they were super cool to us. And it can be very dangerous to meet people that you admire. And it's always scary when they disappoint you, but it's always so rewarding when people you look up to actually meet your expectations and live up to those expectations. And that's exactly what happened. They were so nice to us, they were so funny, they were so interested in what we were doing. It turned out they had gotten there too early too, so they weren't like even able to load in their equipment yet. And that just blew my mind to meet people I admired so much and then have them be just so nice and so genuine and exactly as goofy and silly as you saw on like the albums or in the songs. Then as it got closer to the showtime, more and more people started showing up. So even as a teenager, I was intimidated by teenagers because everyone just seemed to get it so much more than I did, and everyone just seemed so much cooler than I was. But then all these kids started showing up in like these dorky costumes, wearing like helmets and goggles and like spandex like shirts or like rash guards or whatever, wearing stuff that looks like this with things that look like this, you know? Maybe like a Sharpie mustache on top. It's hard to feel too cool for school when this is the stuff that you have fun with. And when you're looking at other people who are like dressed in more elaborate versions of this. And so jump ahead a little bit as like, it's getting closer to showtime, the line is huge, there's this massive crowd of kids, there's like 16-year-olds that are just having like the most fun ever. Like these line parties that would happen before shows where people would like bring costumes and treats and games and everyone would just goof around and like have fun. And we went inside. It was the first time I saw the Aquabats in like their full glory with like full stage show lights, fireworks on the guitars, crazy video projections in the back, commercials, like the whole thing.
It's a tough looking street gang. What's up? I think they want us to fight them. Let that be a lesson to you, street gangs. Don't mess with the Aquabats!
And the experience was just unbelievable because aside from being like this incredible show, just in general, like it's a great concert. Whatever was happening on stage, what was happening in the crowd was just this whole sense of everybody was part of it. And I think there was a sense too, like we were all kind of the outsiders from wherever we were. Like I had driven in, 100 miles to be there, and some kids lived locally and some lived further away, but everyone had this spot where they belonged, and it was this complete ridiculousness. That was the first time in my life that I felt 100% comfortable just as myself, enjoying something genuinely and sharing it with other people who were doing the exact same thing. And that it doesn't sound like much, but it was that little moment at that little club in Hollywood, California, that was the first time in my entire life, in 16 years at that point, that I ever felt like I belonged somewhere. And that literally changed my entire life. Because when I went back to school and to my world where I was still isolated and didn't feel like I belonged, the difference was that I knew there was somewhere in the world that I belonged, and there were groups of people that I belonged to. For the first time in my life, I realized it wasn't me. It was just my location, essentially, like my lot in life, but it wasn't me. And that is huge for anybody to realize, and especially like a teenager to realize. And that simple thing sustained me for years, just knowing that. And then of course, I mean, there were many other shows where you see the same people and you have these crazy line parties and all this goofy stuff happens. After that point, when I went to the shows, I knew that I was gonna be a part of that community. This was the first time where it was like, it just took me by surprise, and it was incredible. The reason I wanted to share that now was because that's a huge formative event in my own personal life. That took place in a time when I had to physically drive 100 miles away to find a place where I felt like I belonged. And now, we hear so much about social media and technology and all this stuff, but if those tools are used well, social media, technology, digital media, whatever, you can find that sense and you can find those communities in even a much more expanded way, not just 100 miles away, but literally on the other side of the planet. You can find people and communities that you belong to and genuinely like interact with. As a teacher, like I see the depression and the mental health struggles that students have. And so much of it comes from the same stuff that I was feeling when I was in their shoes, which is just this sense of isolation and not belonging. And it's important to know the idea that you can find a place where you belong. There's no instruction manual on how to do it. It just kind of involves keeping your eyes open and having this awareness and exploring new things and listening to other people and having, at least the willingness to put yourself out there and say hi or go stand on the street corner before a concert or something. For today, I just thought I would share this simple idea, and when you see stuff like lots of Aquabats things just in the background, kind of like I can't even avoid it, it's not even intentional, there's a big reason why. And if I can do anything to help other people have any kind of similar realization, then that's a positive thing that I definitely want to take advantage of. Okay, let's see what's in here. This is the Key Club, October 25th, 2002. I mentioned that I had quickly parked the car when we got there, and it turns out we had actually parked in the band's parking lot, so when the show was over, we had to ask them to move their cars for us. But then it was cool because they came out and took pictures. Look at that 16-year-old real nerdy guy in a way too big sweater and belt. Man, as dorky as that was such a big deal. This was a cassette tape that someone had thrown on stage that night, and it was Hulk Hogan's band. We got some helmets, masks, Little Bat stress ball. This is like an important thing. I don't know why this should be on display. Belts. Oh, the belts. Wallet. This is in mint condition in a box, relatively new thing. This is an Aquabats watch. Signed, of course. Coloring book. Even got like red cups, copies of magazines and print articles. Got a certificate of authenticity for a blue rash guard. Super cool wristbands. Man, why don't I just wear this stuff every day? If nothing else, at least just do a quick search on YouTube for like Aquabats videos just to get an idea of what I'm talking about. But it's a whole thing. I recognize that it's my thing. It's not necessarily everybody's thing, but having a thing is really important.